Well, the party may be over for party boy Boris Johnson. A total of 28 Conservative backbenchers have now publicly demanded his removal. And if that number reaches 54, and others may have done so anonymously, he'll face a career-defining no-confidence vote. Joining me now is TalkTV political editor Kate McCann. So, Kate, this is getting serious for Boris Johnson, isn't it? Because also tonight, Lord Geidt has revealed serious concerns about Boris Johnson's adherence to the ministerial code in relation to the fixed penalty notice that he got. And you're getting people like, Andrea Leadsom, seasoned, pro-Boris politicians now coming out against him too. I'm feeling the heat from here, and it's getting a bit ferocious.
Yeah, look, I think Andrea Leadsom was a real moment for those in number 10 today, because they believe that so far it's the usual suspects, the people who never really liked Boris Johnson, pretty much always wanted to see the back door, see him leave Downing Street. And then today, that moment when a Brexiteer, supposedly one of his own, has said not quite that he needs to leave, but that his behaviour isn't good enough. And I think Lord Geidt's report might be the moment for some more over the weekend, because Lord Geidt essentially saying unless the Prime Minister sticks to his own code of conduct, well, things could get really difficult. So he even hinted in his pretty long report today, Piers, that he may have considered resigning if the Prime Minister hadn't listened to his advice. And he's pretty frustrated, it has to be said. So it looks like more trouble for Boris Johnson, though the mood in number 10, I have to say, is defiant. They've come out swinging. Essentially, they believe he could win this vote, and they would like to bring it on.
Right, and just to clarify, if he does win the vote, he buys himself at least another year, isn't it, before they can try again? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. 54 letters into Graham Brady, and then a vote triggered within a matter of hours, most likely. Boris Johnson needs 180 plus 1 MPs in order to get past that, but then he's safe for a year under 1922 rules. Now, in number 10, there is a feeling that that could mean the best time for that vote may well be next week, because it comes before a by-election, it comes before the Privileges Committee report, essentially before any more bumps in the road that might cause him some trouble. And if he wins it, he is then safe. A note of caution, though, in January this year, it was suggested they could try and change the rules so that a vote could be held every 6 months. It was rejected at the time, but it could come back again if there are those in the 22 who feel it really is time up for Boris Johnson.
And what's extraordinary is, in the last few minutes, we've now heard that the Durham police have now sent formal questionnaires to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, and his deputy, Angela Rayner, and they only do that if they suspect a COVID rule was actually broken. And both of them have said if they do actually get fined by the police, they will resign. So we could have a situation in the next few weeks where we lose everybody at the top of both parties.
Could be a complete clear-out, in which case, what does it leave? The Liberal Democrats, who could come riding over the hill to try and form some kind of government. Of course, not likely to happen, but in all seriousness, it does show you just how frustrated people are with the state of politics at the moment here in the UK, in Westminster, that the most senior people in the Conservative Party have faced fines, and now the most senior people in the Labour Party are facing questions over their own conduct. It's not a good place to be.
It's not. Kate McCann, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now is former leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, Baroness Ruth Davidson. Ruth Davidson, thank you so much for joining me. It's an extraordinary situation, isn't it, in British politics, where you have the current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who's coming under siege now from his own party, from his own ethics standards boss, from all sides, it seems, and at the same time, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, and his number 2 are also subject to a police investigation for also breaking lockdown rules.
I think this is, Piers, basically because we were told as a country by people at the top that this was serious, that these rules were serious, that sticking to these rules was serious, that it was a matter of life and death, and that this was a time of national crisis, and as such there was a collective endeavour to stick to the spirit of the rules, to stick to the letter of the rules, and that's what would see us through as a country. And I think people, certainly a large proportion of people, are rightly angry when they see those that set those restrictions up, whether it was the Prime Minister who stood at a lectern and told them they had to stay at home, or whether it was the leader of the opposition who voted it through, looking as if it was one rule for everybody else, but those rules that they set for us didn't apply to them. And that's why people who weren't able to hold the hand of a loved one as they died, weren't able to go to a funeral, weren't able to visit an isolated new mother, won't forget what they gave up and what they sacrificed because they thought they were doing the right thing and because they were told that's what they had to do.
I mean, there are still Conservative politicians who stand by Boris Johnson. I'm about to talk to Peter Bone after I talk to you. He's a long-standing Conservative MP, for many years. What's your message to them? I mean, do you believe that the integrity, not just of the Prime Minister and the government, but of the Conservative Party is now at stake here?
Well, actually, I care more about what this is doing to the country necessarily than the party, although, of course, it's deeply damaging to the party. But for me, particularly at a time of national crisis, you need the leader of the land, the first among equals, to be judged to a higher standard, not a lower one. He needs to set an example. He needs to have moral authority, and that's nothing to do with whoever holds the post of Prime Minister. That's to do with the office of Prime Minister itself. And if people look at an office being traduced in this way, if they look at people who are at the very top going, well, actually, we don't have to stick by the rules, then that does filter down to people. And they go, well, why should I stick by the rules either?
Right.
And I do think that it is damaging to the country and to the institution. I'm a Conservative because I support the institutions of this country, and to see them traduced like this, I find it I'm deeply uneasy about it.
Do you think Boris Johnson will survive this?
I think this is a really interesting week because the Parliament's off for a week. It means everybody's back in their constituencies. They're doing loads of things with constituents around the Jubilee. They're having a lot of people come up and speak to them. They're getting a sense of the depth and the breadth of feeling in a way they might not do when they're in Westminster, 6 days a week. So I think that the trickle that you're seeing in the last couple of days is part of that, and we may see a few more.
Many people, Ruth Davidson, think that if there is a vacancy to be leader of the Conservative Party, you ought to be putting your name forward. You were very popular when you were up there in Scotland. Many people wished you'd come down here and been perhaps Prime Minister when Boris Johnson took the job. Are you interested if there is a vacancy?
No, I'm not interested. I value my mental health and my family life too much. I've got a young son, and I'm not interested in the job, and nor am I qualified to hold it. I'm not an MP, so even if I were, which I'm not, I couldn't put myself forward. But what I do want to see is I want to see somebody in the role who understands what the expectations are of the job, and what it is that they have to do to uphold the standards of public life that we need to expect from our leaders and that we need to demand from our leaders.
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I just find it extraordinary that we have a Prime Minister who actually got a fixed penalty notice from the police for breaking one of his own laws. I mean, I just don't know how any Prime Minister in history that I can remember could or should have survived that moment.
I mean, I respect my colleagues. They've been put in a very difficult position, colleagues on the Green benches in Westminster. But what I don't understand is how they can look at the damage that is being done. And if you asked any of them away from this, do you think it's acceptable for a Prime Minister to break a law that he says? They would say no. And if you ask them, do you think it's acceptable for a Prime Minister to be charged by the police and just carry on as if nothing had happened, or not refer himself to the ministerial code? Or is it acceptable for a Prime Minister to stand up in Parliament and say he's appalled by something that he didn't know anything about, and it turns out that he not only knew about it, he participated in it? I mean, do you think any of these things are acceptable? They would all say no.
Do you think
what I don't understand is why they're currently sitting on their hands.
Do you think he's an honest man, Boris Johnson?
I don't know. I've got no window to see into another man's soul. But I think that when he stood up in Parliament after Allegra Stratton, the only person to have resigned over this, let's not forget, and she resigned not because she attended anything, but because she was caught on camera being unable to answer a question about it because she knew it was wrong, standing up saying he was appalled and that people that he knew nothing about had done things that were wrong and he was going to get to the bottom of it. When he stood up and said that, he knew that he was there. And I think that act in Parliament was a dishonest act.
I could not agree more. Baroness Davidson, thank you very much. Please come back and be an MP soon.
Thank you. Not a chance.
You know you want to. I'll take that money in a bet. But lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piers.
Well, I'm joined now by Conservative MP for Wellingborough, Peter Bone. Peter Bone, you are almost a unique creature right now. You're a Conservative MP hitting the airwaves quite regularly, staunchly defending Boris Johnson. Why?
Well, I think most of my Conservative colleagues support the Prime Minister 100%. There's only a minority that don't, and they've never supported the Prime Minister.
Do you think Boris Johnson's an honest man?
Absolutely.
I mean, he was fired as a journalist from the Times for lying. He was fired from a position under Michael Howard for lying about an extramarital affair. People think he's lied about Partygate. The track record of honesty is not good.
Well, I think you're slightly wrong on what you call Partygate. A Metropolitan Police investigation, which cost £500,000, went over many weeks. 12 detectives were on the case, and he wasn't found guilty of partying. He had one fixed penalty notice when he went into the Cabinet Office, I believe, and he was presented with a cake which he didn't know anything about in advance. And surprisingly, the Chancellor also got a fixed penalty notice when he thought he was going in there for a meeting as well. That's not partying. And so I'm not sure why you suggest he lied.
Well, yeah, but that's your impression is it's not partying, but actually that's exactly what the police deduced it was. They investigated all of this and they issued him with a fixed penalty notice for literally breaking lockdown rules by having an illegal gathering. That he was at an illegal gathering. That's why he got a police fine. I mean, the implication of what you're saying is the police were wrong to fine him. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that wasn't what you and I would call a party. You're right to say that he attended an event which he didn't know was about to happen. He was there for 9 minutes, and the police decided to fine him for that. But you're not going to suggest to me that was in any way what most people would call a party.
But we also know that
No, it was reported at the time as well, and nobody complained about it at the time.
But the point about all this, surely, is that it's the scale of the partying, the illegal partying that was going on at Downing Street. The fact that over 80 people working there got police fines for breaking the laws that were made by the people at Downing Street, and that they were doing the partying when they were ordering the public not even to go and see dying relatives in hospital. It's the totality of what has gone here in Boris Johnson's home, which is what it is. And the idea, frankly, that not only was he personally fined, but that he knew nothing about any of these parties when they were on the lash until 4 a.m. the night before Prince Philip's funeral, for example, in Number 10. I just don't believe it. I think that's a dishonest response by the Prime Minister.
Well, I think you're wrong. You will, of course, know that the Prime Minister was not in Downing Street when the party you referred to occurred. And you will also know that 10 Downing Street is a huge office block going over 5 floors. And the vast majority of people who were working in Downing Street at the time behaved properly and abided by the rules.
Actually, a very large number of them, according to the report we all read last week, they were vomiting, they were fighting, allegedly fornicating, breaking swings belonging to the Prime Minister's son. It was just a completely lawless environment in there. And Boris Johnson may not have been physically there for every one of them, but it's his home. He's the boss. These people all work under him. And there's been no accountability by the Prime Minister for the fact that all this was going on, and he himself got fined as well. And I just ask you, if this had been a Labour Prime Minister, would you have had the same opinion, or would you have taken the view that no serving Prime Minister should ever survive getting fined by the police for breaking their own rules in a pandemic?
I certainly would have taken the same view if it had been a Labour Prime Minister. And I take the view that Keir Starmer and his deputy shouldn't resign if they get a fixed penalty notice, because I don't think they thought that they were breaking the rules at the time either. And the fact that there are thousands of people that work in Downing Street. I mean, TalkTV, you're almost the head of it in many ways.
I'm not the head of TalkTV.
You are their chief president.
I'm not the head of TalkTV.
You're the star. But you don't run the office. You don't know. You wouldn't, and I wouldn't expect you to run the office. And I wouldn't expect the Prime Minister to run the office. I mean, part of the time these so-called parties occurred, Boris was in hospital fighting for his life because of all the efforts he'd put in during the COVID pandemic. So I think we have to be careful what we're saying when we're suggesting that these parties occurred in his home. Well, that's not really the situation when we know that it's a 5-storey office block behind that
Well, I've been
door.
in Downing Street many times, and it is a home, and you do know what's going on. And frankly, if you don't know as Prime Minister that 80-odd of your staff are breaking your lockdown rules on a regular basis, sometimes with large karaoke parties involving large amounts of alcohol, if you don't know that's all going on, then it's a failure of leadership, isn't it, as well?
Well, I disagree with you. It's a failure of certain people who are running the Downing Street operation, that's correct. But the Metropolitan Police didn't find that the Prime Minister had been partying at all these events you're referring to. Now, the changes occurred actually before the Sue Gray report came out, because there was an interim report and the Prime Minister acted on it. And those people have gone, and there's a completely new system in Downing Street to make sure this wouldn't happen again. So I think the Prime Minister's done what Sue Gray wants. He's apologised. And I think most people in the country want him to get on with the job. I was stopped by a constituent today when I was walking into Wellingborough, and he said, look, I was a Labour man, but I switched to the Conservatives because of Boris. He got us through Brexit. He got us through COVID. For goodness sake, leave him alone and let him get on with running the country. And I think that's what most of the people in the country think.
Yeah, you could take a view that Brexit was bad for the country, and you could take a view that his early handling of the pandemic was a complete disaster. So it depends who you talk to. But Peter Bone, I appreciate you coming on Piers Morgan Uncensored. It's good to see you.
Thank you.